All right.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the Cahokia Archaeological Society monthly meeting here at the Collinsville Library. Tonight we have our special guest who's been here giving programs many times to our chapter and very interesting topics. Larry Kinsella is an experimental archaeologist. He replicates and duplicates and uses and makes all kinds of tools and weapons and pottery and fibers and all kinds of things. And he's given several presentations on those topics. Tonight he's going to be talking mostly about spears and atlatls and bannerstones, a very interesting weapon that was in use probably for about 10,000 years before the bow and arrow came into use. And I'm sure he's going to give us some great insights tonight. Larry Kinsella.
All right, and great insights. Okay. So I guess where I'm going to start is with the word atlatl. From what I heard, the correct pronunciation is the emphasis on the second syllable. I always call it atlatl, but atlatl seems to be the correct way to say it. It's the Aztec word for spear thrower. And a lot of the Aztec spear throwers, some of them even have gold handles. They're very ceremonial objects. I saw a paper at Friday Archaeology at WashU where a gal was talking about the potter designs down in Mexico, that whenever they show a person with a bow and arrow, that it's always for hunting. And when it's warfare, it's always the atlatl. And that atlatls are also shown to be spear deflectors. You can deflect the spear when it comes at you too. This is the one I've been using for many years. It's an old piece of sassafras. I never thought would hold up, and I've been using it for at least 25 years now. It's fitted with a Clovis point that I made and have socketed. So this is the typical thing that you would use all the way from taking mastodons and mammoths up to rabbits and squirrels. The thing is we don't see this during the time of the mammoth and mastodon. We don't have any evidence. So when you don't have evidence, experimental archaeology helps a lot. So we had some early experiments to see if these would penetrate a mastodon or mammoth type of thing. So they use them on elephants. And the first one that I know of was Eric Callahan with the Ginsberg Project. And they had an elephant that died at the New York Zoo named Jumbo. And they took him and put him up in the mountains to keep him frozen until they could get all the archaeologists there. And they got about 10 of them, I think it was. And they rigged up all kinds of pulleys. And so every time you used the butchering knife, it would register on the computer. This is the very early days of computers. So it was a grand scheme of things, to really good experiment, except when they showed me they only got them to penetrate about that far. The spears did not penetrate the way they thought they should. And when you look at the photographs, you can see ice crystals in the meat. And it just wasn't completely frozen yet. So then they had another one at the Oklahoma City Zoo named Dumbo. And Dumbo died, and they got the archaeologists there within 24 hours. And they threw spears into him, only went that far again. A thing called rigor mortis had set in. Seized up the muscles and didn't penetrate. So everybody kind of figured, well, we're going to have to do this on live elephants. So Dr. George Fison from the University of Wyoming had a very unique chance to go over to Africa, and they were thinning the herds because the African elephants were eating all of the acacia trees, and that's one of the main food sources for the elephants. So a lot of the elephants were dying off. And so what they did is they brought big game hunters in there and shot 20 elephants at a time. And then Dr. Fison got in there with his atlatl, threw spears into him, got him to penetrate 32 inches. This was the experiment that told us that it's possible. So he then butchered the elephant with the foreshaft. So if you ever are going out to Bighorn Mountains, when you go through the Bighorns, there's 3 passes, and Ten Sleep Canyon is the southern pass. If you go through that, you go to Ten Sleep. There's a nice waterfall there. You go through it into Worland, Wyoming, and you'll come to a big curve, and there'll be a big mammoth statue in front of you. And that's a new museum. Well, now it's not new. It's probably 6, 7 years old. But the one exhibit in there is of George, and all of his tools still have the elephant blood on them and everything. But he was a really good experimental archaeologist without even knowing it, because he was raised in Ten Sleep, and he was taking antelope and mule deer with the atlatl when he was 10 years old. So he knew what he was talking about. I think George died about 4 or 5 years ago, but he was mentor to many people in archaeology out west. So let's see, that's not the one I want. This is it. So I want to read you something that came from his survival by hunting. And it's something you don't expect, but if you're an atlatist, it tells you what's going on. Continued experiments convinced me that to create the optimum hunting equipment, it was necessary to take into account a number of factors, including the user's body size, weight, and arm length, the atlatl and main shaft length and weight, and the foreshaft and projectile weight. A long period of trial and error is needed to bring these several variables into perfect harmony. Once that harmony is achieved, the resulting weaponry will become one of the most personal of human possessions. I have tried several different atlatls and darts made by others and have been unable to achieve results nearly equal to those obtained using the ones with which I have become intimately familiar. This is important with atlatls because this shows you that they're individual, that they're made for the individual, and usually by the individual. So I didn't meet George until 1980. I went out to the atlatl contest out in Saratoga, Wyoming with Dave Klostermeyer, and that was the first time I participated in the contest. The cool thing was there was a lady, Ada Jackson, and Ada was one of these gals that had almost leathery skin. You could tell she had lived out west for a long time. And she was in her 80s then. But she knew everybody that had anything to do with archaeology. And she helped farm a little museum there in Saratoga, Wyoming, where the airfield was. And so the people that were at this atlatl contest had experience in atlatls, and they were world famous archaeologists. So George Friesen was there, Waldo Weedle, Marie Wormington. I got a picture of Waldo and Marie guarding my trophy. That was pretty cool. There was I can't remember the guy that was running the Denver Museum at the time. There was what's his name? I should have wrote it down. I did, but I forgot my dang list. But several of the Bruce Bradley, that's the one I was trying to think of. But there were several other major archaeologists, and they all came to this thing for a little thing they called Camp Paleo. And so they had this up on the high hill where the airport was. That's where they held the get-together with the flint knapping and the spear throwing. But then you went back in this pasture about a mile, and you came to this plateau, and it was you wouldn't hold 20 cars. And so you would sit out there and bring a chair with you, and sit there and listen to these guys give the latest research that they had done. The only thing they never told you was that there was a pond at the bottom of the hill, and this was the most mosquito-infested thing you ever saw in your life. You were swatting mosquitoes the whole time. I have never learned as much as I have about atlatls in those conferences. I only was able to go 3 or 4 times when all of them were there, but I learned an awful lot. And George, I must admit, when he came to the Collinsville show about 10 years ago and they gave him an award, he knew me. I couldn't believe it. So that was the place where I got to get involved with a lot of archaeologists. It wasn't until the next year. The first year I went out with a cane spear. The wind caught it. You know, it's always windy in Wyoming. It never stops. So the wind was blowing 50 miles an hour whenever you try to throw spears, and that little cane dart would blow 20 feet. So the next year I went with a hickory spear, and that's when I won. So then the next year, 11-year-old boy beat the snot out of me. So I learned a lot there, but that's what brought up the thing about bannerstones. All the people that were throwing out there, they kept saying, well, these bannerstones, they can't be worth a dang. They're too hard to work with, and what are they for? So that's kind of when I got the seed to go ahead and try to replicate bannerstones and things like that. The first, I guess the real thing that got me going was this book here. This is a reprint, but Atlatls and Bannerstones of Indian Knoll. William S. Webb. Dr. Webb was a noted archaeologist at that time. He dug several of these sites, and they're shell mound sites. They are, instead of burying the dead with dirt, they have so much shell, they just bury them with dirt and the shell. And the shell makes a really good environment for preservation, because the acidity in the soil in Kentucky is neutralized by the alkaline in the shell. So that's why we were able to have antler hooks and antler handles and things like that preserved. The thing was, when Dr. Webb's got together and looked at all this stuff that he had found, originally they thought William, can't remember, the earlier archaeologist that kind of looted the site, C.B. Moore, he just looted only 800 burials. So I think Webb had close to 1,200. So when Webb or Moore looked at it, he thought that the hooks on the atlatls, the antler hooks, were knitting needles, and this had something to do with making fibers and things like that. And eventually they got it just didn't add up. So Dr. Webb published a book. He did this one is the development of the spear thrower. That's the last one he did. This one's University of Kentucky the Reed Archaeological Site, and then Chiggerville. I would like to know how they got the name Chiggerville. I bet I know. And the Carlson Annis Mound. If you look at Patty Jo Watson's book with Marquardt, they revisited the Carlson Annis Mound and did some more research later. And I think was very good for me, because she became involved with bannerstones at that time, and that would benefit me later on. What Webb wrote was that the bannerstone added momentum when you threw. What you do, you hook it into your spear, makes your arm longer, allows you to throw 3 times farther. But when it hits with almost 300 times more impact. It's almost unbelievable the power that this gives. And so he thought that this added momentum to the throw, because it did hit harder. But when we all experimented with it, we found out it didn't. It took 15 yards off of our distance. So, and then when I talked to the people in Wyoming, yeah, they had the same thing. So it had to be for something else. And we spent a long time trying to find that out. Dr. Webb published this, or didn't publish this book. I've read this thing probably 20 times and never really looked at the introduction in it. And this was written by Webb's lawyer. Yeah, Mr. Moody. And I'm just going to read it to you. I have always felt a special obligation to assure that Dr. Webb's unique knowledge of the functioning of an atlatl got disseminated to my public. My personal association with him, and indeed on many physics discussions during my employment with him as an illustrator, so he illustrated this book and probably a couple of the other ones, was shared with no one. At his death in 1964, this is published in 1967, but at his death in 1964, he left behind a large manuscript on the archaic culture, which had as a chapter the information in this monograph. His friend and colleague, Dr. Charles Snow, made a concerted effort to have the entire manuscript edited and published. Unfortunately, no professional anthropologist was available who would edit and review the entire manuscript, but those contacted all were extremely impressed with the atlatl chapter. At Dr. Snow's death in 1967, that's when this was published, the entire manuscript was still being for editing, review, and publication. His widow, Mrs. Kane, or Miss Katie Snow, turned his title over to me at her behest, and with her approval of Mrs. Webb, the entire manuscript and illustrations were retrieved by me in efforts again restored at publishing it. All persons agreed with the atlatl chapter containing Dr. Webb's scientific explanation of the physics of the atlatl should be published forthwith. My only regret with my minor involvement in this project is that it took so long to get the information to consumers, and those who have finally affected its publication should be commended. So, without reading this and reading the rest of his explanations, all the atlatlists that I know kind of poo-pooed Webb, saying this was added distance and everything, when they knew it didn't. And so, I puzzled about that. Why would Webb publish that? Now I know he didn't publish it. He was dead 3 years when that information came out. And like most people getting ready to publish, he probably didn't have the final draft right there. So I read this and finally realized that it wasn't his fault, that he probably had the right idea anyway, but at least he, since he was into physics and not necessarily archaeology, and his other buddy, Mr. Snow, was also a physics person. That wouldn't be a physician. Anyway, I think that's why William Webb got a bad rap from this whole series of books. The Bannerstones, there are tons of them. If you look at the Indian Knoll book, they're scattered throughout, and they have atlatl handles and hooks, some of them. Finding out that they weren't nearly as prolific as I thought. You didn't have an atlatl. There were only 4 that had the atlatl, the handle, and the hook, or the Bannerstone, the handle and the hook. That's not much of a consensus. But Bannerstones and hooks, yeah, they were everywhere. So many of these probably had wooden handles, and many of them, I bet you, were decorated to some extent. So that was a clue right there. One of the other things that you see with Bannerstones is they're usually snapped right down the middle. In fact, I think there were 72 at Indian Knoll, and only about 25 of them were still whole. The other ones were segments or pieces of the Bannerstone. So think about burying somebody, and you're at the sub mound, and you're digging down into the floor of the mound, and you're burying a person with their atlatl. And it didn't matter if you were a man or woman or child. There were about the equal number. Some infants even had bannerstones. So you backfill that burial, and you get a big rain. Since that soil is looser, and the water will go right down to the burial and sit there. If you have this wooden shaft get wet, it's going to expand and break the bannerstone. I think that's probably why almost all bannerstones are broken to some extent. So it's a bad environment to save those tools. We're lucky we got anything. It was only the alkalinity of the shell that really saved everything. That's why we don't find them anywhere else. The ones up at Bullseye in northern Illinois, up near Pearl, Jim Weir found that, and then Campsville wrote it up, and they're on display at the Illinois State Museum. They are nice examples. Most of them are offset wing type and geniculates. What's that? So, Mr. Lutz, if you want to see a lot of bannerstones, the whole book is full of every type of bannerstone you can conceive of. Now, I'm not saying that they're all real. There may be modern pieces in some of these, but they come in all shapes and sizes. And then they come down to 2 bannerstones, and then I don't know if they have the bar weights in here. No. The bar weights, we've also found that there are almost as many bar weights as there were bannerstones. And the bar weights were tapered pieces about this long down to about that, and they tapered slightly from one end to the other. And what we think they are, Dave Fostermeyer brought this up to me, is that they probably had an envelope made of rawhide on the underside of their atlatl, and then they slid this in and tied it to make the weight. And then when they didn't want it, there's reasons you wouldn't want a bannerstone. You could take it back out, and then so it's made to be inserted and reinserted. So the idea of this bannerstone is to help something. It didn't help with the throw, we know that. And many experiments have been going on. Bob Perkins, the atlatl guy out in Montana, says it's a silencer. And he did do sound checks with it, but even if you take a regular atlatl and add a rock to it, it's going to go slower, and therefore it's going to be quieter. So that didn't have much to it. And it wasn't until I've been working on this for about 35 years. And when I mushroom hunt in the spring, wasn't until about 73 we started getting deer in our area in Fairview. That was the first white-tailed deer I saw. And so when I mushroom hunt and I see a deer, I'll freeze. And they'll check me out. As long as I don't move, I'm fine. Boy, if I move at all, they're gone. So I observed the deer, wondering what the heck they were doing, why they were so skittish. I can go back to George Frizen's book, that there is a gigantic difference between white-tailed deer and mule deer. White-tail are much more skittish than mules. And so the skittishness is what made me think that maybe that had something to do with a bannerstone. So I was talking about doing a lot of stuff and never got around to it. And then I was at Friday Archaeology, and John Kelly said, "Hey, we got this guy I think you ought to meet." I said, "Yeah, well, for what?" He said, "He might have a way to help you." And I said, "For what?" He said, about bannerstone. So he dropped me down to a lab, and there was Dr. Herman Ponzer. And he was doing biometrics, studying electrical impulses in your muscles. And he said, well, we do some of this for different weaponry and stuff like this. He said there has been some of it done with bow makers in England with the big long bows. And they can steady the stress on the muscles. And they said that when they dig burials of those bowyers, that the left arm is much bigger than the right arm because they don't pull the bowstring back. They hold the bowstring and push the bow out like that. So this arm, and they said the muscles are almost twice as big in that arm as the other one, because they're using up to 120-pound bows. So I said, well, yeah, but what's that going to do with me? And well, he said, your idea that this might balance might show up. So what we did is we went over there, down in that little dark room, and they hooked me up with leads on my arms, and I held there for 2 minutes. Because when I was doing the mushroom hunting, I noticed that it would take at least 2 minutes for that doe to look away long enough to get a shot. It's much longer for a buck. And I couldn't hold this for 30 seconds. And you can see how it's sagging on me now. So I held it for 2 minutes without the bannerstone, and then 2 minutes with the bannerstone. And we found out that this relaxes your muscles, and this allows you to outweight the deer. The deer put their head down and they'll try to fake you, and this allows you to sit there for 2 or 3 minutes if you need to, waiting for the deer to look away. Well, that was pretty cool. So we did some other experiments with some of the students, and it was totally different. And I'm like, why aren't they feeling the same thing that I was? Well, what they did, and I wasn't patient enough. What they did is they came like this and rested. And that's why their readout didn't come out right. You have to be in this position, ready to throw. Because if you go like that, when the deer's looking at you, they're gone. So I've been saying that this is for outweighting the deer. Let's see if I can get my... So on the readout, if I can... This was when I was out at Carlisle Lake, and we got rained out, and half the pages on my books are stuck together now. Let me get the other one. So it showed a fairly good difference between using a bannerstone and not using a bannerstone. So if I get my glasses. So the 2 minutes with the bannerstone, without the bannerstone, and 2 minutes with the bannerstone, the deltoid had 62% decrease. The forearm back and 46%, forearm front 72%, and then the biceps very little. And the bicep, it's really kind of funny. You'll see a big jump right as you start holding it, and then it all evens out in both whether you use a bannerstone or not. So I figured, okay, that's a fluke. Maybe it didn't work that way. And I thought I had here we go. I guess that's it. So I went back 2 weeks later. No, this is the same one, I think. Anyway, it ended up that I held for 2 minutes with the bannerstone, 2 minutes without the bannerstone, and then 2 minutes with my arm sitting at my side holding nothing. And that showed that using the bannerstone is within 1% of holding nothing. So that made my paper when I presented it down at SEAC. So to get to that point, I had to make some bannerstones. So I put them in a simple vise, something like this. And everybody in Knobloch's book said that they used sand. And then, so I thought, well, that's weird because sand is going to be worn by the river. It's going to be round. It's not going to cut anything. And sure enough, man, I practiced. No way. And I was trying to do all of my drilling with a piece of cane and sand and water. Well, I lost like that much cane in an hour or two. And I said, boy, this doesn't work at all. This is nothing like what Knobloch did. And what I looked back on Knobloch's work, found out that he never drilled a bannerstone. He only drilled them 1/4 of an inch and then extrapolated how long they would take. And he said they would take anywhere from 3 days to 3 weeks to drill one hole. Well, that was just astounding to me. Now I do them in 6 hours. But I finally found out what I needed to find out was what kind of grit did he use. He tried industrial grits. He tried all kinds of things to get them to cut. And I said, what did the Indians have tons of that was really sharp? And I swept up my floor in my basement after making arrowheads, took it outside, sprinkled it over a tarp and let the wind carry the fines out farther, and then took those fines, and that's what I'm using to drill. So little, about 1 millimeter size pieces of flint. Put about 15 or 20 grains in there. My hands are probably slick. There it is. And that's what you drill with. And this can be really irritating in no time. But after I get one pass, I don't know if you can see that. I got quite a bit of work done with just that one pass. So what this does is it allows you to make bannerstones or drill a hole much more easily. And they look authentic. Most of the thing when people buy fake bannerstones, they drill them with diamond drills. So there's the same diameter all the way through the banner. This, the top is always about 1 millimeter or 2 millimeters wider than the bottom because the grit hits more at the top than it does at the bottom. Everybody I talk to, they always say, put a bow drill on that, it'll go even faster. It does not. And I proved that when I did Patty Jo Watson's bannerstone. This one is Julie Morrow's here. This is Patty Jo's. And I use the same cane that I drilled the bannerstone with as the main shaft. So that core is right here. But I have a readout of it right here. I put it on the computer and I marked where, at what time, how long it took each hour, how much I did. So I took the beginning of it and I used it by hand, and then I made a little bit of it for the bow drill. I used the bow drill for 1 hour and I got 2 millimeters. In my bare hands, I was getting 9 millimeters. So I knew that what's happening is the grit is splaying out and it's not staying at the bottom and cutting. I also learned something else. When I drilled, I got that far and my cane split. I said, well, that's no problem. It doesn't matter. Well, it did, because it's starting to splay out and I got less and less until I got to that point. So I couldn't go through all the way with that cane. So I cut the cane back to where it was good again, and then I drilled it from the other end. Many bannerstones have holes drilled from both ends. I just can't hardly believe that I was able to hit it pretty close. So here I used the bow drill again, only got 2 millimeters. Right next to it, I used my hand and got 9. All right, so I get up to where the other hole is, and they meet, and there's just a little hole about 1/8 of an inch by 1/4 of an inch. And I couldn't get the core out because the grit kept falling through that hole and it wasn't cutting anymore. So I said, well, how am I going to get that out? So what I did is I took some clay, red mud clay in front of my house, and I filled this all with mud until it dammed that up. And then the next morning it took me 17 minutes to get it out because it held all the grit right there. That came in later came in very handy for me. So this one took 10 hours, 42 minutes and 22 seconds. When I always have a stopwatch, I try to do 2 minutes at a time and then keep really good records of it. I never was worth a damn at keeping records and hated taking notes in high school, but now I'm glad I did because I can actually prove what I'm doing. I can do that now probably in 2/3 of the time from what I've learned since then. I learned that if I moisten my hands every second pass down the drill, then really increases efficiency. So some simple things like that, you can bet that the ancient people were doing things to make it work better too. I've got another Bannerstone pre-farm here. This was one I had for the kids to work with at Cahokia Mounds on Archaeology Day, and the kid grabbed the thing and pulled it and broke the Bannerstone in half. But it shows you what it looks like down in there. Come up later, take a look at that. So then I thought, well, how do they work with geniculate Bannerstones? And there's, if I can find some here, I know I saw a bunch of them. Geniculates are L-shaped, and they have, so they're heavier on one side, there we go, like those, but the holes are always elongated, they're not round. So if you're how the heck did they get that? So I started experimenting with that, and I cut the first hole. I put a template of wood, put my grit in it, cut that first one in about 4 or 5 hours. Then I needed to make another half hole next to that. So what I had learned is about the mud. So I just filled the old hole with mud and then cut the other core out. This is the core that came from the geniculate. The geniculate, then when I drilled it, it gives, now I haven't reamed it, they would have reamed it after they drilled it, but I got a rounded hole like that. So now, the next thing that I'm working on is what is this for? And so, I think I've got it figured out, but it's going to take a little more experimentation. So if you look at Julie Morrow's geniculate, here, I have it half the perpendicular to the atlatl itself, to the throw line. So what I notice, especially working with kids and many adults too, is that when they take back their atlatl, it's never flat. It's always turned inward toward them like this and not like that. That's very unnatural to turn your wrists like that. So what I started doing was taking that geniculate and putting the weight to the outside of my throat. When I start my motion forward, it automatically pulls my hand around to the correct position, and I can throw a little farther with it. So I think that's what they are. Now maybe that sounds silly, but that they're going to spend all that time, but you're putting something on the table with this, and I don't think they're worried about time when it comes to feeding themselves. In fact, through my experience with all the experimenting that I've done, it always comes back to food. the animal that they're taking, that's what needs what they're doing. That's why you need a Clovis point to take a mastodon. Because it's got these two flutes here that make this in a much tighter profile, allows penetration. Mastodon mammoth's skin is about this thick. Last inch of the quarter consistency of a rhinoceros hide. I need water. So, the other thing about a Clovis is that it is not wider at the base. It's wider here, mostly at the midpoint. So when all the cutting is done, it follows through. These are made to penetrate big, thick skins. That's why you don't see Clovis points after that time period. So if you look at the tool, try to look at the animal that you're hunting. So think about my theory about taking white-tailed deer. And Patty Joe pointed this out to me, is that if you look at when the Atlatls come in, or Bannerstones, they come in about 5,000 to 7,000 BC. About 7,000 to 8,000 BC is when white-tailed deer start to come in because the coniferous forests are leaving and the deciduous ones are coming in. Coniferous forests, you'll have mule deer in that area. Remember I said that mule deer are totally different than white-tailed deer that Dr. Frizzle was talking about. And it makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't need this for any other animal other than a white-tail. Now, there is one other, a turkey. A turkey too, you need to be completely frozen. If you move at all, they're going to take off. Now here's another one. How about bird stones? I don't think Mr. Lutz has bird stones in here, if I remember. But they look like a bird, and they tie onto your atlatl. Yep, I don't see them. And it's very curious that he doesn't have them there. Because people have said, how come you haven't hafted any bird stones? And I said, well, because no one has ever found a bird stone in archaeological context. Any of you ever heard of a bird stone being found in context? No. And that's why I started with Indian Knoll, because there was a lot of Bannerstones found in context, really good context. They got photographs of them sitting there right next to the burials. So I would love to do something on bird stones, but even the ones that I've seen that they swear they came from a mountain, I'm not sure.
What does that mean then?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Well, I think it means that there's a lot of fakes out there.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of fake Bannerstones, but there are, I think, almost all the bird stones. They're so fancy, and they bring, $10,000, $20,000 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
So that can happen. So when the price is right, you get all kinds of things. So what I've done is I put my drilling process on my YouTube site, and about every 6 months or so, or maybe a year, Dr. Ponzer showed me that biometrics, that made a big difference. So I guess, let's see, what else have I got that I haven't talked? Oh, yes. Mike Jurenko came out with this book, Prehistoric and Natural Wonders of Southern Illinois. And if you look on this page, it's got a humanoid figure with a staff. To me, that's an atlatl dart with the atlatl crescent bannerstone on the atlatl. He's holding it like with the point on it. Oh, he's holding it like this with the point out. There's the crescent, it was a crescent bannerstone. The handle, some of these handles get pretty ornate, I think, and that might be what's shown, but it doesn't look like a handle. But as soon as I saw that just the other day, that's when I was thinking about that. I got some pictures of the Bannerstones in situ on the Reed site. and Indian Knoll. This article was written by Powell about 7 or 8 years ago, and he included me in the article along with Alan Harn, and let me see. Okay. Well, I can't find the spot right off. Anyway, he gave me a lot of good credit on this, and I respect Alan because he's done more work of white-tailed deer than anybody. He's been hunting white-tailed deer and writing about them in the Illinois magazines for a good, I think 55 years, he said. And I brought my atlatl up there to Dixon Mounds, and I said, Alan, you ready to be blown away? He said, yeah, blow me away. So I had him hold it for 20 seconds with the regular atlatl, and then as soon as he grabbed the other one, he said, oh my God, Larry. And that made me feel great, because he could feel it right off the bat. When you're hunting white-tailed deer too, a modern bow has let off. When you pull back here, it allows you to sit there a little bit. Well, this is the equivalent of that, except it works even better. So there's a guy that wrote an article in Central States, Mr. Vulcan, and he said that atlatls or bannerstones go on the spear. And they slide down the spear and bam, they drive that point home. And so he wrote 3 different articles. So I'm going to pick one of my rebuttals here. Okay, this is my favorite. No credible physical or circumstantial evidence of any kind exists that suggests bannerstones were attached to atlatls. An offhand opinion by William S. Webb over 75 years ago seems regrettably to have been adopted as fact to this day. And my rebuttal is the above statement is so incorrect, it compelled me to respond. At Indian Knoll, 32 burials had bannerstones in direct physical association with atlatl components. There was 1 at Sugarville. There were 3 at Carlson Annis and 6 at the Reed site. In at least 2 occurrences, 1 at Reed and 1 at Indian Knoll, the bannerstones were definitely in line and nearly touching their associated antler hooks. There were at least 7 other near alignments at Indian Knoll. There has never been a portion of a spear dart found in association with any bannerstone, to my knowledge. Dr. Webb's offhand comments were based on years of detailed archaeological excavation and research. It may have been wrong in his interpretation that they added power or accuracy to the throw, but that doesn't change the fact that he collected direct physical and circumstantial evidence for bannerstones being associated with atlatl components. And I was really thrilled with this because I took about 7 of his questions and answered them, and he never wrote back. So I must have arrested him in nerve anyway. But there are so many really wild ideas out there about bannerstones that he just hit me the wrong way. And I figured I had to respond. So I got anything else up here I need to talk? Oh, this is the article that was in Archaeology. This is one that Patty Jo helped me with, and I'm eternally grateful to her. That's why I made the atlatls for her. And in order to prove that the cane is used for the drilling, I used the same cane that I drilled the bannerstone for. It goes into the hook, which just makes perfect sense. And the good thing about it is if you glue the bannerstone, most of the time you have to rough up the cane because it won't accept the glue and it just slides. The cane has that silica on it, just doesn't bond. But all those scratches from making the bannerstone work beautifully. So you don't have to prepare it at all for that too. I'm also thankful for Missouri Archaeological Society having this great poster that came out. So I think that's about it. If anybody has any questions, yeah, Bill.
Yeah, to go back about speculation about what bannerstones were, the fact the name Bannerstone, people used at one point thought they were on the top of a staff as some kind of a symbol, as a banner.
Yeah.
And so I think that was one of the first misleading interpretations of them.
I think from what I can see, the name started with 3 of them that were found, I think it's South Carolina, in a field. And they were found together, and there were 2 stone rods that long, tapered on both ends, that fit down the hole of the atlatl, or the bannerstones. But only one of the holes went all the way through. The other 2, they only went part of the way, so they thought that that was a staff to put on there and hold it, but actually they were the stone drills. Instead of drilling them with core drills, they were drilling them with solid shafts in that instance. And it's pretty easy to tell ones that are drilled with a solid shaft and the ones that are drilled with core drill.
Yeah.
I know when I forgot.
And the variety of shapes, there's something like probably 100 different styles. I think some people say that's
Sassaman and Rainbow.
it was these were sort of the treasured objects of the hunter, and they took a lot of care and made them fancier than they had to be,
right,
functionally, but to have maybe a spiritual kind of connection with.
Right. Sassaman and Rainbow back east, they have a lot of information on bannerstones, and they believe that they're a cult symbol, that they represent a cult. The only thing I haven't seen though is that the same bannerstone goes throughout the cult. It looks like they're all different kinds of bannerstones. Down there they get it's almost one bannerstone at a lot of different sites. But yeah, that's the other thing I forgot to mention is that with my drilling of bannerstones, it also got me into another direction, because there are tons and tons of shell beads at Indian Knoll. I mean tons. This is just one batch. If you look at the size of it, most of those could be drilled with a bannerstone drill. So I think they're straight-sided. You know, Mississippian are rounded. These are very straight-sided. One thing I notice is that when I drill my bannerstones, that up at the top, it kind of slobbers around a little bit. And so it makes it kind of rounded on the core, but the other end comes out totally flat. You get the same thing with those. There's the top of the bead is rounded just a little, and the bottom is usually flat. But it's so hard to see because there are 7,000 beads, and a lot of it's been eroded away. But I think that is how they're making those shell beads, because if you're making the way you do Mississippi ones, that's going to round those edges. These are vertical edges. I mean, they're really cut. Yes.
So for the geniculates, and that back to the poster, the Missouri Archaeological Society. So should it have been turned at a 90-degree angle to have it be for the poster, for the photograph? Or?
But that doesn't explain the elongated hole. The elongated hole shows that it has to be sideways, because that's what makes. Otherwise, it could slide around as you start your drill forward. It could spin on the shaft if it was a regular bannerstone. But with that makes your arm. I mean, there's no messing with it. It brings your arm. In fact, that atlatl, I almost didn't give it to Julie because I fell in love with it. It was the best throwing atlatl I've ever had. And one of the things that you really got to watch is if you're throwing something with a bannerstone, it is totally different than with a regular atlatl. And I'll have somebody try it, and they'll go like this and break off the hook, and it drives them right into the ground. You got to really practice with it before you get used to having that weight on it.
So the students that brought their arm down to rest during the experiments in Dr. Ponzer's lab?
Yeah.
Is that because they weren't experienced with?
No, it's that I wasn't watching closely. They were holding it and resting, and they need to be up like like that to feel, feel that, and you couldn't hit a deer in the resting position because you got to raise it up and they're going to see that.
So you can't rest.
Right. You got to have it in that throwing position. That's why the Bannerstone makes so much difference. Because I mean, and if you want to try it, when I'm at the Collinsville Artifact Show, I'll see a guy come by and he's really interested. I say, "You a hunter?" "Yeah." "Hey, try this," and I'll have him hold with a regular atlatl for 35 seconds. That spear point just goes lower and lower and lower. Then I have them hold it with I try to get it within 5 seconds and change it out so that they feel it right away. If I can do it within 10 seconds, man, wow, is that a difference? And so I figure if I can change deer hunters' minds about it, and I really enjoy that because I know that person's got some experience. And then there's a lot of people that don't agree with what I say, and I think most of those are out west where mule deer are the easier ones to get, and you don't need it. So if you look, like I said, you look for the game that they're hunting, but you also look for the environment. Out west, you don't have Bannerstones. You got weights and small ones and flexible atlatls. Back here, you don't have flexible atlatls. Well, you may have them, but the ones with Bannerstones are rigid. And so, why would you want a rigid one here? Well, you've got out there, you got no humidity. So if you made a shaft going through like that, it's going to dry out the shaft, and it's going to spin on you. All right. So if you look at what they do, they put one and they tie it on. Well, it doesn't matter if it makes a click out there because they're hunting mule deer. The mule deer, that's not going to bother them much at all. So we had a discussion in Primitive Technology magazine between myself and Dave Halliday. Dave Halliday is the guy that dreamt up Wilson in the Survivor movie with Tom Hanks. And when I went out to Rabbit Stick, he'd been there like 3 or 4 years already. And I came out and showed him how to make a stone axe. And we became fast friends. The next year, he had 6 stone axes that he had made. It's like, that's a lot of work. So he and I started a conversation in Primitive Technology where I would talk about why things are a certain way in my area, and he would say the same thing about what went on in his area, as far as stone axes and Bannerstones and things like that. I was I really enjoyed it, to tell you the truth. So, okay, I think that's about it.
I have 2 questions.
Yeah.
First question, when you go to this contest, how far away is the target?
From here to the wall.
Okay,
Now.
and then is it also depend, this is part of the first question, does it all depend on how far that goes into something, or just the distance?
No, that's one of the problems with the Atlatl contest that I've been trying to solve for years, is the penetration. And the only thing I can think of now that would gauge that is to have that jelly that they use for ballistic tests. And but that's expensive stuff too, and you have to hit it just right. So what I wanted to have is, let's make the contest not only for accuracy, for also for penetration. I think that would be really interesting to see what a Bannerstone will do for penetration versus a regular atlatl, and different throwing styles. Remember what George said, every atlatl is custom made for that person and becomes a part of them.
My second question is to Bill. Is there any other person that you know of that does what this person does?
Well, ain't that stupid?
Not here. Not here.
Not here. We gotta get off my heat.
He knows the array of what he has done and spent his life to do.
Well, he
he talks about going to Rabbit Stick. This is this place out in Wyoming, Idaho, where people like him all gather together and share and experiment. And
So there might be a few other people out there.
a few others.
I wanted to tell you that the main target is from here to the back of the room. They also have distance targets. They have 50 yards, 100 yards, 150 yards, and 200 yards. So, I was going with a regular atlatl, this is before my Bannerstones, and I came within 6 inches of the 200 yard target. The problem was you have to throw another one. And so the target's right here, and it was still hooked in when it hit, and I broke my tip off the atlatl.
Well, if they were not, if they were.
I'm sorry, 150 yards, wasn't the 200.
If they were trying to kill an elephant, they had to be pretty far away for that to get up some sort of speed, right?
Not really.
No?
No, you can, it will gain speed, but you can take this spear that I have right here and throw it to your cargo. That's the power that it hits with. Yeah. It doesn't seem like it. So, okay. All right, thank you very much. If you want to come up and look at the stuff on the
You gotta be
table,
out by 8 o'clock.
I forgot about
Quarterly,
Let's try and find information.
Larry?